What if someone told him that in one American state, Christmas was illegal, people needed permission to grow a beard, and a wave of molasses once wiped out an entire neighborhood like a slow, sticky tsunami? It sounds fake, but every single one of these actually happened in Massachusetts. From bizarre laws to unbelievable history, this state might just be the most confusing place in America, and by the end of this video, nothing will make sense anymore. Christmas was straight up illegal in Massachusetts, and not in a funny way, but in a you-will-get-fined way, and people in Boston actually had to pretend. December 25th was just another boring winter day, while neighbors secretly judged each other like undercover holiday police, and if someone dared to celebrate with joy or decorations, they risked punishment. All because Puritans thought fun was suspicious, and happiness might distract from religion, which makes this easily one of the most festive buzzkills in American history. 2. A massive wave of molasses once flooded Boston, and it sounds like a joke until it becomes horrifying because this thick, sticky syrup moved like a slow, deadly monster, crashing through streets, trapping people and buildings, while residents tried to escape, but instead got stuck in what felt like edible cement. And firefighters struggled to even move through it, making this disaster one of the strangest and most unbelievable tragedies where something as sweet as molasses turned into a nightmare no one saw coming. 3. 4 entire towns were completely erased from the map, just so Boston could have clean drinking water. And the wild part is people were forced to leave their homes forever, while entire communities, including houses, churches, and cemeteries, were flooded under what is now the Quabbin Reservoir. And even today, divers claim the ghostly remains still sit underwater like a lost world frozen in time, which makes this one of the strangest sacrifices where history was literally drowned to keep a city hydrated. 4. A book in Boston is actually bound in real human skin, and it sounds like something from a horror movie. But this was a real request from a criminal who, after dying, wanted his own body turned into a book cover. And now, it quietly sits inside a historic library while visitors walk past it, not realizing they are inches away from human leather, which somehow turns reading into one of the creepiest experiences imaginable and makes libraries feel way more unsettling than they should. 5. In Massachusetts, you can legally attend a funeral wake, but if you get too hungry and eat more than 3 sandwiches, you could technically be breaking the law, which turns a quiet, emotional gathering into a strange counting game where people might actually pause mid-bite, wondering if that 4th sandwich is now a criminal act. And it creates one of the most awkward situations where grief meets food limits, making absolutely no sense in a place already full of bizarre rules. 6. Taking a bath in Boston technically required a doctor's prescription at one point, which means staying clean was somehow treated like a medical condition, and people could not just decide to wash themselves without permission, making everyday hygiene feel like a controlled activity. And imagining someone walking into a clinic just to ask if they are allowed to bathe makes this rule one of the weirdest examples of how normal life once needed official approval for no logical reason at all. 7. Eating peanuts in church could land someone in serious trouble and even jail time, which turns a simple snack into a criminal offense depending on where someone is sitting. And it is hard to imagine how quietly enjoying peanuts became such a concern that it needed a law in the first place. But somehow this rule existed, making religious gatherings not just about behavior, but also about controlling what people could munch on during long services. 8. In one town, a person needed an official license just to wear a goatee in public, which turns facial hair into something that requires government approval, and makes it seem like growing a beard was less about style and more about paperwork. And the idea of someone being stopped or questioned over their chin hair creates a ridiculous image where even personal appearance was regulated in ways that feel completely unnecessary and oddly strict for something so harmless. 9. It is actually illegal to frighten a pigeon in Massachusetts, which sounds like the pigeons somehow have legal protection from emotional distress and makes people wonder how anyone would even enforce such a rule or prove that a bird was scared on purpose, and the thought of someone getting in trouble for accidentally startling a pigeon turns this into one of the funniest and most confusing laws that somehow made its way into official records. 10. A husband could be fined for snoring if the bedroom windows were not properly closed, which turns something completely uncontrollable into a punishable offense and creates the bizarre idea that someone could be held legally responsible for making noise while asleep, and imagining a nighttime argument turning into a legal complaint makes this one of the strangest examples of how even private household habits somehow became regulated under rules that feel completely over the top. 11. Bringing a gorilla into the back seat of a car is somehow illegal in Massachusetts, which immediately raises the question of how often this was happening for lawmakers to step in and stop it. And the mental image of someone casually driving around with a full-grown gorilla sitting behind them, like a quiet passenger, makes this rule feel both completely unnecessary and strangely specific, as if one very chaotic road trip forced officials to draw a line somewhere. 12. A man criticizing his wife's cooking could actually be considered illegal, which turns a simple dinner table comment into a potential offense and makes every meal feel like a careful performance where honesty might lead to trouble, and imagining someone nervously taking a bite and choosing silence instead of risking consequences creates a hilarious situation where domestic life becomes legally protected from bad food reviews. 13. Eating pie on Sundays was once banned, which somehow turned one of the most American desserts into a restricted activity depending on the day of the week. And it creates the strange image of people waiting until midnight just to legally enjoy a slice, while authorities decided that even something as harmless as pie needed control, making this one of the most unnecessary and confusing food laws ever created. 14. Men with mustaches were reportedly not allowed to kiss women in public, which somehow connects facial hair with public behavior and turns romance into a regulated activity based on appearance. And the idea of someone being denied a kiss because of a mustache creates a ridiculous scene where love had to follow strange grooming rules, making this one of the weirdest combinations of style and law imaginable. 15. It was illegal to marry someone with the same last name unless proof was provided that they were not related. Which sounds reasonable at first but quickly becomes awkward, as couples would have to defend their relationship with evidence and explanations, making what should be a simple celebration turn into something that feels like an investigation where love had to pass a test before being accepted. 16. Playing the fiddle in Boston was once illegal, which somehow turned music into a punishable act, and makes it seem like entertainment itself was viewed as suspicious. And imagining a musician quietly practicing only to be stopped for making cheerful sounds creates a strange world where even harmless creativity was restricted, making this one of the most confusing ways a city tried to control joy. 17. Roosters were not allowed inside bakeries, which sounds oddly specific, but suggests there was once a problem serious enough to require a rule. And the image of a rooster wandering between bread and pastries like it owns the place makes this law feel both hilarious and oddly practical, even though it still raises questions about how common bakery-invading chickens really were. 18. Defacing a milk carton could get someone fined, which turns something most people throw away without thinking into a protected object, and creates the strange idea that even a small doodle on packaging might be considered a problem worth punishing, making everyday items feel surprisingly important under rules that seem far too strict for something so minor. 19. Giving beer to hospital patients is illegal, which sounds like common sense now, but also raises the question of what was happening before this became a rule. And imagining doctors or visitors casually offering beer as part of recovery makes this law feel like a reaction to a very strange past where medical care might have looked completely different than what people expect today. 20. False teeth were required to be removed before certain private activities, which turns a personal moment into something regulated by law, and creates one of the most awkward rules imaginable as it reaches into situations no one expects the government to be involved in, making this one of the strangest examples of how far regulations once extended into everyday life. 21. In Massachusetts, stopping at a red light was once not required unless the light was flashing, which sounds like complete chaos waiting to happen, and creates the image of drivers confidently cruising through intersections while others panic and slam their brakes trying to figure out what counts as a real stop. And it turns one of the most basic driving rules into a confusing guessing game where safety somehow depended on interpretation instead of clear logic. 22. Dogs are not allowed to ride in ambulances, which makes it sound like somewhere at some point a dog decided it needed emergency transportation, and officials had to step in and say absolutely not. And the idea of paramedics arguing with someone about their injured pet getting a ride creates a bizarre situation where even urgent moments had strange limits placed on them, for reasons that are never fully explained. 23. But putting tomatoes in clam chowder is basically forbidden, which turns a simple cooking choice into a serious debate and makes people act like adding one ingredient is a crime against tradition. And imagining someone nervously stirring tomato into a pot, while others react in shock, shows how seriously this unwritten rule is taken, making food culture feel oddly intense for something that should just be about taste. 24. Detonating a nuclear device in Marlborough is officially illegal, which sounds obvious but also incredibly unnecessary because no one should ever need that reminder. And the fact that it had to be written down makes people wonder what kind of thinking led to this rule existing, at all creating one of the most extreme examples of a law stating something that should never even be considered in the first place. 25. Squirt guns were once illegal to buy or own in Marlborough, which turns a harmless childhood toy into something treated like a serious problem and creates the strange image of kids being denied simple fun because of a rule that feels way too strict. And imagining someone trying to enforce this law against a water fight makes it one of the most confusing overreactions to something completely innocent. 26. Bullets cannot be used as legal currency, which sounds obvious, but also suggests there was a time when people thought using ammunition as money might be acceptable. And the idea of someone trying to pay for groceries with bullets creates a bizarre scene where basic transactions turn into something completely unusual, making this rule feel like it exists to stop a very specific and strange kind of behavior. 27. Swearing inside Boston city limits was once illegal, which turns everyday language into a punishable act and creates the image of people constantly watching their words in public to avoid trouble, and imagining someone getting in serious consequences over a single frustrated sentence makes this one of the most unrealistic attempts to control how people naturally speak. 28. Children were allowed to smoke but not allowed to buy cigarettes, which creates a strange contradiction where the act itself was not banned, but the process of getting the product was restricted, and it leads to the bizarre image of kids somehow already having cigarettes but being told they cannot purchase them, making this one of the most confusing and inconsistent rules imaginable. 29. Watering your lawn while it is raining in Holyoke is illegal, which sounds logical at first, but also raises the question of who is monitoring people during rainstorms. And the idea of someone rushing outside to turn off sprinklers while it is already pouring creates a funny scene where nature itself becomes part of law enforcement, making this rule feel oddly specific and unnecessary. 30. In Provincetown, selling suntan oil before noon on Sundays is banned, which turns a simple beach day purchase into a timed activity and makes people plan their sun protection around the clock rather than the weather. And imagining someone standing in the sun waiting for permission to buy sunscreen creates a ridiculous situation where even basic needs are controlled by rules that feel completely out of place. 31. So 2 men are not allowed to carry a bathtub across the town green in Longmeadow, which sounds like such a random situation that it immediately makes people wonder what exactly happened to inspire this rule. And the image of 2 confused guys struggling with a bathtub while being stopped by authorities creates a ridiculous scene that feels more like a comedy sketch than real life, making this one of the most oddly specific laws ever written. 32. Delivering diapers on Sundays was once illegal, which turns something essential for families into a restricted activity, and creates the strange idea that babies somehow needed to follow a weekly schedule for basic needs, and imagining parents panicking because supplies cannot legally arrive on a certain day makes this rule feel completely disconnected from reality and unnecessarily strict for something so important. 33. Now, shooting at targets that look like humans is illegal, which sounds reasonable but also highlights the fact that people were apparently doing this often enough to require a rule. And the thought of someone being told to aim at anything except human-shaped objects creates a strange line between acceptable and unacceptable practice, making this law feel like a reaction to something very specific and slightly unsettling. 34. Excessive lace on clothing was banned because it was believed to encourage pride and waste money, which turns fashion into a moral issue and creates the image of people being judged not for their actions, but for how decorative their outfits were. And imagining someone being criticized for wearing too much lace makes this one of the most unusual ways society tried to control personal style. 35. Not making toasts while drinking was once outlawed to prevent excessive alcohol consumption, which turns a common social gesture into something suspicious and creates the awkward image of people raising glasses in silence without saying anything, and imagining celebrations where no one can cheer or acknowledge the moment, makes this rule feel like an overcorrection that completely removed the fun from gatherings. 36. Denying that the Bible was infallible could result in banishment or even execution, which shows just how extreme early laws were, and creates a tense atmosphere where beliefs were not just personal but enforced. And imagining someone expressing doubt only to face severe consequences makes this one of the most serious and intense examples of how strict control once shaped everyday life. 37. Our colonists were required to bring guns to church every Sunday, which turns a place of worship into something that feels more like a guarded meeting and creates the image of entire congregations sitting together while armed and ready for anything, making this one of the most unusual combinations of religion and preparedness that feels completely different from what people expect today. 38. The stubborn children law allowed parents to legally punish rebellious kids in extreme ways, which turns normal family disagreements into something far more serious and creates a frightening image of strict authority where children had very little freedom to express themselves, making this one of the harshest and most unsettling rules from early Massachusetts history. 39. Under strict blue laws, people were not allowed to cook, clean, or even cut hair on the Sabbath, which turns an entire day into a period of total pause where normal activities suddenly become forbidden, and imagining households carefully planning everything in advance just to avoid breaking rules creates a strange routine where even basic tasks were tightly controlled. 40. Candy is only allowed to contain a very small amount of alcohol, which sounds oddly specific and creates the idea that even sweets needed regulation to prevent misuse. And imagining someone carefully measuring ingredients to make sure a piece of candy does not cross a legal limit makes this one of the more unusual ways authorities try to control even the smallest details of everyday consumption. 41. Or selling dyed rabbits or chickens is illegal, which sounds oddly specific until someone imagines brightly colored animals being sold like decorations. And it creates a strange image of people turning living creatures into novelty items, while authorities step in to stop what must have once been a very real and questionable trend, making this one of the most bizarre rules that tries to protect animals from becoming walking pieces of artificial art. 42. The Big Dig Highway project became one of the most expensive construction disasters in American history, as costs exploded to billions, while delays piled up, and then things got worse when a concrete ceiling panel collapsed and killed a driver, turning what was meant to fix traffic into a symbol of massive failure and mismanagement that still makes people question how something so important went so wrong. 43. Chocolate chip cookies were invented in Massachusetts, but the original Toll House restaurant where it happened burned down, which nearly caused the famous recipe to disappear forever. And imagining a world without chocolate chip cookies makes this moment feel far more dramatic than expected, as something so simple almost vanished due to one unexpected disaster. 44. See, one of the biggest art heists in history happened in Boston, where thieves stole priceless paintings and disappeared without a trace. And what makes it even stranger is that the empty frames still hang on the museum walls like a silent reminder and almost a challenge, as if the crime itself became part of the exhibit, making this mystery feel unfinished even decades later. 45. Massachusetts introduced the first driver's licenses in America, but did not require an actual driving test for years, which means people were officially allowed to drive without proving. They knew how creating the chaotic image of early roads filled with confident but possibly unqualified drivers, making this one of the strangest starts to something that is now taken very seriously. 46. The first public beach in America opened in Revere, but early laws banned swimming on Sundays, which turns a relaxing beach day into a restricted activity and creates the odd image of people standing near the water but not allowed to enter, simply because of the day, making this one of the most unnecessary limitations placed on something meant for enjoyment. 47. Massachusetts still follows old blue laws that force many stores to close on major holidays, which means even in modern times, some businesses must shut down because of rules rooted in centuries-old beliefs, creating a strange mix of past and present where tradition still controls parts of everyday life in ways that feel outdated to many people. 48. The John Hancock Tower once had glass panels that started popping out and falling to the street, which turned a modern skyscraper into a dangerous situation, as people below had to avoid falling windows, and the building even earned a nickname because of how often it needed repairs, making this one of the most unexpected design failures in a major city. 49. Paul Revere is famous for his midnight ride, but he also worked as a dentist making false teeth from materials like animal bones, which creates the strange image of a historical hero, switching from warning about danger to crafting early dental work, making his life story far more unusual and unexpected than most people realize. 50. A mysterious collection of plastic rocking horses known as Ponyhenge appeared overnight in a field, and no one knows who put them there, which creates a strange and almost eerie scene where objects seem to multiply and rearrange on their own, making this one of the weirdest unsolved local mysteries that continues to confuse visitors and residents alike. 51. Massachusetts is home to a lake with a name so long that most people cannot pronounce it on the first try, and even locals shorten it because saying the full name feels like a challenge. And imagining someone confidently attempting to say it in one breath only to give up halfway makes this one of the funniest examples of how something as simple as a place name can become unnecessarily complicated. 52. Some Boston streets still follow old cowpaths from centuries ago, which means modern drivers are stuck navigating roads that were never designed for cars. And the result is a confusing maze where turns feel random and directions rarely make sense, creating daily frustration for anyone trying to drive through a city that still follows the logic of wandering animals. 53. Old rules in Boston still reference duels to the death in certain situations, which sounds like something from a completely different era, yet somehow remains part of the legal language. And imagining officials standing by while two people settle disputes in such an extreme way makes this one of the strangest leftovers from a time when conflict resolution looked very different. 54. There was once a law requiring children to be taught good behavior and manners, which sounds reasonable until it becomes a legal obligation and creates the image of families being held accountable for how polite their kids are making. Everyday parenting feels like something that could be judged or enforced in ways that go beyond normal expectations. 55. In Boston, it is technically illegal not to bathe before going to bed, which turns a personal nighttime routine into a legal requirement and creates the strange idea that someone could be breaking the law simply by being too tired to wash up, making this one of the most unexpected ways rules have reached into private daily habits. 56. Vending machines cannot be hung from utility poles, which sounds like something that should never happen anyway, but also suggests that someone once thought it was a good idea, and the image of snacks dangling from poles above the street makes this rule feel both ridiculous and oddly necessary at the same time. 57. There was once a rule that banned certain political groups from renting major venues, which creates the strange idea that even access to large spaces could be restricted based on beliefs and imagining events being denied. Not because of safety, but because of ideology, makes this one of the more unusual intersections between politics and public spaces. 58. The infamous Ponzi scheme that scammed thousands of people actually started in Boston, which makes the city part of one of the most famous financial fraud stories, and imagining people trusting a system that promised easy money only to lose everything turns this into a cautionary tale that still influences how scams are understood today. 59. Happy hour is not allowed in Massachusetts bars, which means discounted drinks at certain times are banned, and the rule traces back to concerns about drunk driving, creating a situation where something common in many places is completely restricted, making nightlife feel slightly different compared to other states. 60. One town only allows white Christmas lights if they are visible from the main street, which turns holiday decoration into something regulated by color and creates the image of residents carefully choosing lights to avoid breaking rules, making even festive displays feel controlled in a way that takes some of the fun out of decorating. 61. In Provincetown, there is a rule that bans the sale of suntan oil before noon on Sundays, which creates the strange image of beachgoers standing under the sun, waiting for permission to protect their skin. And it turns something as basic as sunscreen into a timed activity where people must plan around the clock instead of the weather, making this one of the most unnecessary restrictions for a place known for relaxing coastal life. 62. Holyoke made it illegal to water your lawn while it is raining, which sounds logical at first but quickly becomes funny when imagining someone being watched during a storm just in case they accidentally leave a sprinkler on. And it creates a situation where nature itself is already doing the job, yet the law still steps in as if people cannot be trusted to notice the obvious. 63. There is a real place called the Museum of Bad Art, dedicated entirely to terrible paintings, which turns failure into an attraction and creates the hilarious image of visitors seriously observing artwork that was never meant to impress, making this one of the most unique examples of celebrating mistakes in a way that somehow still draws attention and curiosity from people who want to see just how bad art can get. 64. Shooting at targets shaped like humans is illegal, which suggests that people once needed to be told not to practice in ways that looked too realistic. And it creates the strange image of someone carefully choosing targets just to stay within the law, making this one of those rules that feels obvious, yet still had to be officially written down. 65. Giving beer to hospital patients is illegal, which sounds reasonable now, but also makes people wonder what kind of situations led to this rule existing in the first place. And imagining recovery rooms where alcohol was casually offered as part of treatment creates a bizarre contrast to modern healthcare expectations. 66. There is a rule stating that false teeth must be removed during certain private moments, which turns something deeply personal into a regulated action and creates one of the most awkward legal ideas imaginable as it reaches into situations no one expects laws to exist, making it both confusing and strangely specific. 67. Dogs are not allowed to ride in ambulances, which creates the odd image of emergency workers having to explain to someone that their pet cannot come along, and it turns serious situations into slightly absurd moments where even urgency has unusual boundaries placed on it. 68. Detonating a nuclear device in Marlborough is illegal, which sounds completely obvious, yet still had to be officially written as if someone somewhere needed that reminder, making this one of the most extreme examples of a law, stating something that should never even be considered. 69. Bullets cannot be used as legal currency, which suggests that at some point, people considered using ammunition as a form of payment. And the idea of someone trying to buy everyday items this way creates a strange and confusing image of transactions that feel completely out of place in normal life. 70. Swearing inside Boston city limits was once illegal, which turns everyday speech into something that had to be controlled and creates the image of people constantly monitoring their words. In public making, natural expression feel restricted in a way that seems impossible to enforce. 71. Children were allowed to smoke but could not legally purchase cigarettes, which creates a confusing contradiction, where the act itself was not banned, but access to it was restricted, and imagining how that situation worked in practice makes this one of the strangest and most inconsistent rules in the state's history. So after all of this, he has to ask, how is any of this even real? And what other state could possibly compete with laws this weird in history, this chaotic? And now the real question is, which one of these made the least sense to you? Drop it in the comments, and if you enjoyed this kind of crazy content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Dumbest Things for more unbelievable stories like this.